So I've been asked to give reflection. This is a time where the funeral for Tenjakun Mongkon Kititara, Ajahn Mahamon, have the cremation tomorrow. And so many of the disciples of Lumphacha and Tanajan Mahamon and from this tradition gathered for this ceremony of cremating his corpse, and that's why funerals are an important part of our practice, because we're all going to end up that way anyway, on the pyre or in the grave. So after that cheerful note, this is just to remind yourself that there's respect for somebody who devoted his life for practicing meditation. He was a highly regarded Pariyatti monk in Ubon when I arrived at Wat Papong in 1967. He wasn't at Wat Papong yet, but he was. The following year he came, and it was quite a special event because I didn't understand all the implications or significance, because of being a foreigner and not understanding the language. I didn't really become aware of how significant it was that one of the high regarded Pramaha Pali teachers I think in Ban Nong Khun, wasn't it? They had a very good school for training monks in Pariyatti Dhamma. And of course, there's always this division of the first Wat Ban, which didn't mean anything to me then either. But usually the Wat Ban monks and the forest tradition monks didn't have much contact, and there's kind of a sense of strong views about Pariyatti, Patipatti, and so forth. And so when Ajahn Mahamon came, he was quite well known, high regarded, and gave up his position as a teacher, and where he would have eventually probably been Jalkun, Jalkuna Jangwat, and all the rest. He had the intelligence and ability to go high in the hierarchical structure of Thai Buddhism, but he gave it all up to practice with Ajahn Chah. So this was, and very few Pariyatti monks would do that. I think Ajahn Mahasupom, who some of you might remember, he also came a couple of years later. And I remember Tanajan Mahamon always saying to me, one thing that at that time I was learning Thai and learning to read the Thai script, and the one teacher like Tenjakun Puttatat in Suan Mok, he was quite controversial at the time, but very well known, and they published his books and pamphlets, and Lumpha Cha really liked Ajahn Puttatat's teaching. So even though he didn't want, he asked me almost right off from the beginning to put away my books and not read anything for the Pansa. And he said, read your chit, read your mind, So this was the teaching, is like do jit, do arom, and this was I had enough ability to understand Thai to get that point. But Buddha Tat was also highly, kind of a genius scholar in those days, and quite controversial. Like, he was published, they published a book in Bangkok, and people were talking about this book called Dua Gu Kong Gu. And of course, I mean, I didn't see what, it didn't mean anything to me, but to Thai, this is like, Dua Gu Hong Gu is actually me and mine, the self-view, but Gu, I think, is a rather coarse term or for a monk to use or whatever. So Buddha Thought liked to really kind of stir things up a bit, taught people to really look at themselves and trying to bring attention to the profundity of Patipatta or practice, meditation practice. And so there was, at that time, the two months that I had most interest in were Luang Por Chah was my teacher, and then also Buddha Thought. And so Thanajan Mahamon one day said, before I practiced meditation, I tried to read Buddha Thought's books, and it just didn't make sense to me. Couldn't figure it out. It was nonsense. And he said after meditation with Luang Por Chah, suddenly he started reading Buddha Thought and understanding. Because it's like, if you're just on a Pariyatti level, the intellect, just knowing Pali and Buddhist philosophy and theory, that's one level. But Ajahn Chah was he'd always use the word Patipatti, monks who practice. And because Thailand is, at that time, the Patipatti tradition was still rather remote. And in 1967, 68, Thailand still, they didn't have proper roads, and northeast Thailand, Isan, Ubon was really, most Thais never came here to the Isan, and it was the Thai forest tradition, Ajahn Man and all that was known by a few people, but generally the Buddhism of Thailand at that time was the Wat Ban, the village or the city or the Pariyatti Dhamma. And during these years, this 45 years ago, the power of teachers like Luang Por Chah and Buddha Thought, just their direct teaching. Buddha Thought was brilliant at the Pariyatti Dhamma, but also he was, he wasn't just a Pariyatti monk. He was also, meditation was the way to develop Pariyatti Dhamma rather than just know Pali and keep, know the scripture from the intellectual level. So this is, not knowing anything about Thailand at the time, it was didn't know what Thai Buddhism would be like. But my experience here has been, my direct experience was always that I became very much aware of these very direct, very enlightened teachers very quickly. Sometimes it amazed me when I think back, because a foreigner coming into a place where you can't speak the language and a completely different culture from anything I'd ever experienced, and then being able to tune in on this level through actually putting into practice what the Buddha taught in the Pariyatti Dhamma, and also the important, like Luang Por Chah and Buddha Thought, both were emphasizing Four Noble Truths as the way of practice. And I started out in Bangkok in a different style, it was a kind of Vipassana style, Mahasi Sayadaw style, but they never talked about Four Noble Truths at all, as I remember. And so it was all about, a kind of very strong method, which was quite helpful in the beginning. But Ajahn Chah was always reflecting on these Four Noble Truths. And so this is, and also Buddha Thought put it in was able to attract, especially from the university level, the educated classes, because of his kind of knowledge on that level. But Luang Por Chah was also very, the Vinaya was very important. So, and in Sun Mok, it didn't seem to, it didn't really talk about it much, or it didn't have the same emphasis, the same power that Luang Por Chah placed on developing the Vinaya. And so, it was through living with Ajahn Chah that I began to see the value of how, I used to wonder when, the story in the scripture of when the Lord Buddha was passing on, and then his disciple Ananda said, "What are we going to do without our teacher when you're gone?" And he said, "I leave you the Dhamma Vinaya." For a Western mind, the kind of Western mindset that I had was, well, Dhamma, I'm really, marvelous. But Vinaya, I couldn't see the point of it. When you started reading the Patimokkha from a Western mind, and all these kind of little rules, and the sense of offenses, and that all seemed superfluous to me in the beginning. But during the year I was a Samanera before I met Ajahn Chah, I did have insight into the fact that if I was to develop, I needed a form, I needed a structure to live in. Because like Dhamma, there's no structure to it. It's all, it's letting go and being free from all grasping. And then it isn't structured, it's a very precise way to free the mind from delusion. But living your life because you have to live till you die, then how are you going to do that just on Dhamma level? And I could see my own limitation coming from very kind of liberal background where kind of rules and forms and traditions were kind of totally discarded and rejected and despised for the ideals of individuality, freedom, and follow your wishes, your desires. And I knew at the end of my Samanera year I needed structure. I needed something to hold me down, to put boundaries on my behavior. So I had to learn how to conform. I was always proud of being a non-conformist. When I was in university, I always considered myself a non-conformist, and then to come into the Wat Pah Pong tradition where it was total conformity. But yet I couldn't be, by the time I came to meet Luang Por Chah, the need for that was something I had no control over. I couldn't adapt it, change it, bend it to my own views. I had to fit in, and I knew that would be very difficult for someone who'd always prided themselves on being an individual and non-conformist. But it's through that kind of determination, the way that Luang Por Chah kept the Vinaya. It wasn't just keeping rules and threatening you with eternal hell for breaking them, but it was always aligned with mindfulness, like to be able to bounce off these boundaries and your own emotional resistances or views or opinions that you have, to be able to see, the Four Noble Truths in your own mind. And so you did have this sense of that was the rules were all about kind of, moral precepts, and then social etiquette and ways of doing things, prescribed ways of living with each other, and that was from, that we regarded as coming from the Lord Buddha himself. So it was through that training that I began to see why the Buddha told Ananda, I leave you the Dhamma Vinaya. Because that's what we have, the Buddha, the Lord Buddha, the sage, passed away 2,554 years ago, and so, but we still have the Dhammavinya, and you can see here in Ajahn, and in the monasteries, branch monasteries of Chawat Bapong and so forth, this sense of Dhammavinya as a way of developing, cultivating, and living. So, like Ajahn Mahamon with, began to really, he had the Pariyatti knowledge. He was very, very clever, very intelligent man, gifted poet and writer, but he didn't really understand the essence or the heart of Buddhism until he started practicing it. So you've got this Pariyatti, Patipatti, Patippatti, three things like that. This paradigm is one of, you have the teaching of the Four Noble Truths as the Pariyatti teaching, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, and then, but it's always about putting it into practice. So you've got Pariyatti is the kind of initial thing, then what do you do with this teaching and say there's the First Noble Truths of suffering, there is suffering, there's dukkha. You can say, well, sure, there is. What do you do about it? And then the Patipatta, understand, so that you, that understanding then is not, thinking I understand because I understand the word suffering, or think I understand what dukkha is on the, it's a common enough word in any language or any culture, but this sense of understanding is like really changing your attitude towards suffering, rather than just trying to run away from it, blame it on others, endlessly seek for happiness and to get away from anxiety, fear, worry, and so forth, to understanding. To understand something, you have to accept it for what it is. You can't just, I don't want suffering and dismiss it. But it's taking it and learning from it. And so this is understanding suffering. And then the Patippatti, the third aspect of the First Noble Truth, is the result of that Patipatta, of that practice. So this is a paradigm of insight and reflection. In the Western mind, people living in the UK for so long, people don't quite get, what do you mean by reflection? Because they want definitions, what do you think dukkha really means? What is the exact English equivalent for the Pali word dukkha? And Pariyatti monks get into real profound discussions about the ultimate and proper English translation of dukkha, and which is all right. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's not a matter of defining it, but of understanding it. It's this, So you start observing your own sense of anxiety or dis-ease or worry or whatever. It's just kind of mild doubt or unhappiness, or whether it's, real anger or rage or jealousy or greed and whatnot. And so it's not a matter of the intensity, but of the understanding. It is the way it is. Also, it's important to recognize that intellectually you don't feel anything in life. If you just live in your head with definitions and intellectual concepts, you don't feel life. You tend to operate from ideas about how things should be, make judgments about yourself or about others. But in the Patipatta, it's not about it. So the Pariyatti has its purpose, but the Patipatta is where we actually observe suffering. And not, you can observe it as something external to you, but that stillness, you haven't quite got the point till you observe that sense of loneliness or fear or anxiety or worry or excitement or whatever emotion you happen to have in the present moment. You can't help how you feel in the present moment. You know, you feel like this. Maybe it's not. Then the judgmental mind will come in and say, "Oh, if you're feeling angry or lonely or whatever, you can pass judgment on yourself or blame it on somebody else." Or you can actually observe it. It's like this. So Buddha taught was always. I think, I don't know where I remember him saying if he was stranded on a desert island and somebody asked him, what would you do what would you take with you if you were stranded on a desert island? And he said, a little medallion saying, Ben Yang Ni'eng, this is the way it is. And I always kept that in my mind, they have in BBC, they have in England, they have this program called Desert Island Discs, where they have view some kind of famous person, and they have to choose what they would take with them on a desert island, if they're what kind of music or whatever. And so I was thinking of Buddha taught, he'd just take a little kind of, maybe a medallion of sorts, or just a wooden chip with the way it is. Now to contemplate that, because like the thinking mind is a discriminative function we have. It discriminates. So it says this is big and small and right and wrong, and good and bad. And so the thinking mind is a divisive function in consciousness. So when you're attaching to thinking all the time, to ideas, and there's always this sense of being separate, of division. It's the inevitable result of attachment to conditioned phenomena, and especially to the thinking process, which holds to you can create brilliant ideas, like we should all love each other and be free and happy and democracy and all the rest is all these high terms and ideals that we can create of where each person is loved and accepted for what they are, and everybody's keeping the precepts properly. You can create ideal monasteries, where everything is, in your mind. You can create an ideal monastery where all the monks are practicing hard, keeping the precepts and developing metta practice, where we all get along and help and support each other and work together in harmony, and our credit to the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and to Luang Por Chah, Thailand, and all the rest of it. It's an ideal, beautiful ideal. But this is the way it is, that you, even though you create an ideal, you can't make it happen. So the Buddha's emphasis on dukkha was observing that the way it is. So like in those early years with Luang Por Chah in the Wat Pah Pong, I created a lot of suffering in my mind around things, because I didn't understand, I misunderstood things, I had vipaka come, I had attitudes that, from my own background and opinions, and I liked some monks, I didn't like others, and I thought this was right and this was wrong. All the time, in my mind, I was creating suffering. And then Luang Por Chah, his kind of, even when I didn't understand the language very well, he could get me to reflect on that, on my own unhappiness or critical mind, and opinions I would have about how they should practice and what they should be and all that kind of thing. So I began to get this sense of being the puru, the Bhutto style, where you're observing. Because I couldn't help how I felt. I couldn't make myself full of love and metta all the time, and I couldn't feel that. I liked the idea of it. It's certainly a beautiful idea, but the reality of the present moment was like this. And that's where I began to really appreciate the way Rinpoche taught, because he was getting me to look at what I'm actually feeling. He wasn't telling me what I should do. Because you can't tell anybody that, you can say you should feel this, but actually at this moment you're feeling the way, whatever you're feeling, it's this way. Maybe it's not what you want, but it's like this. And so this is a reflective style where you're understanding dukkha. You're really observing, and you're willing to look at feeling, not from the critical mind, but from the direct reality of it in the present. It feels, because feeling arises and ceases and changes. It's continually changing. You can't hold on to a feeling and petrify it and stay with it, keep it. It changes. And because feeling is like this. It's anicca, dukkha, anatta. So this puru, this knowledge, this knowing, understanding, coming from, not from views and opinions about Buddhism, but from practicing with suffering, its causes, the end of suffering. Now this is a very, this is a very simple teaching. You couldn't find, I've never seen anything that could compete with Buddhism, Buddha's teaching. For the first sermon he gave after his enlightenment. That's as good as you'll get on this planet, in something that's practical and isn't based on ideals and concepts that you can't prove to yourself. It's all based on your willingness to be honest and look and have this confidence in your ability to observe what you're actually feeling, but not judging it and saying, I am angry and I shouldn't be. Then you're making more of it. But if you're feeling angry, anger is like this. So what I'm doing now is just observing. I'm not angry, by the way. But if I was, then there's a way of just observing. You feel it. You have the sense of feeling of excitement or heat or whatever. Anger is quite obvious. It's a strong emotion. Well, the difficult ones are the kind of where sexual desire and anger aren't so much the dominant emotions you're feeling. They have to deal with doubt and loneliness and worry and wanting things, not wanting problems in your life, wanting everything to be something it isn't, and wanting peace and harmony. I remember monks in England, I say, all I want is peace. This kind of whinging style. We want peace. Peace. And the word peace became like a sickening concept, because, it's like, but this realm that we're living in isn't peaceful. The conditioned realm, nature is not very peaceful. And your body's never going to be very peaceful. So you can tranquilize it at times and make it feel better, but peace is what do you mean by that? And also, if you don't know what peace is, when you do experience it, you find it pretty bloody boring. Peace is really boring. So, monks are very good at, when they get peaceful, to then stir up things, because make the monastic life a little more interesting. So, and I was at, the university in Berkeley, California, back in 1963, and there was all these peace movements. I used to belong to the Quakers, the American Friends Service Committee, and an anti-atomic peace committee, and we'd go on protest marches carrying placards, say peace. And then suddenly, here I was yelling, saying peace all the time, going on marches, but then I suddenly realized I didn't know what I was talking about. I wasn't peaceful. I was asking the world to be peaceful for me, but I wasn't, peaceful in my mind. That's when I inclined to become Buddhist monk, because of the shock realizing the hypocrisy of going around demanding the American government build peace in the world when I can't even do it myself in my own mind. So this is, that brought me really to see that I had to do something with my own mind. I just couldn't go around blaming the President of the United States or the Russians or anything else for wars and lack of peace when I couldn't even do it myself. So then coming here to Thailand, you have this sense of finding like teachers like Luang Por Chah, and Wat Pah Pong in those days was very kind of primitive, and no kind of luxury, softness or luxury. It was all pretty rough, and Ajahn Chah was at his peak. I was very fortunate in being with him at his very best years, and. But he could also put you to a test, make things very unpeaceful for you, and you used to think he should try to make everything peaceful for us, and then you see your own kind of wanting somebody to make your life peaceful for you. But he never, his way of teaching was never through malice or through trying to upset people, but trying to help us to look at our own minds and keep directing our attention at that until we actually had that kind of confidence, that insight. There is suffering. Suffering has been understood. Suffering should be understood. Suffering has been understood. So this is like taking something. There's nothing esoteric or precious about dukkha. It's the most ordinary feeling we all have, every creature. Whether you're a caterpillar or dog or cat or human, they all have to live within the limitation of the forms that we're in. And in a universe that is very, vast and frightening and threatening. We're sensitive, vulnerable creatures. And so trying to create peace, make all that so it doesn't upset me or threaten me in any way, can't do it. It's impossible. But I can recognize peace through mindfulness. And so this is the whole way of the Buddha, is pointing to this sati sampajanya, satipanya, and developing, just using this ordinary, human, banal, common experience of dukkha, suffering, and taking it, so it's not like some high-minded, high form of philosophy. It's very practical, very simple, but very direct. And then if you follow the structure of the Four Noble Truths, you see for yourself, it works. Actually, if you follow that way of the second noble truth, third noble truth, fourth noble truth, but you're internalizing. You're not. It doesn't take long to memorize the Four Noble Truths, but to actually apply them and to see in your mind, in consciousness, conscious awareness of suffering, the causes of suffering, desire, ignorance and attachment to desire. And this is a desire realm. This is all about the body's a desire form. It's not your fault, it's just the way it is. And so we're hungry, we're thirsty, we get tired, we want to sleep, we want to feel safe, we want to protect ourselves, procreate the species. This whole thing, your body's a form, is a desire form. And so that's why the way of relating to the body's changed from judging it in terms of right and wrong, good or bad, but observing the body, like the first Patipatti, Anupasana, where you're actually observing the body for what it is, not trying to dismiss it or judge it, but observe. Now knowing that ability to observe, what is that? That's the Bhutto, the ability that is what the Buddha's, this is the essence of the teaching, is to develop this awareness of the way things are, that all conditions are impermanent, all dhammas, there's no self in it, there's no personal dhamma, or the personality, the sense of me and mine, is a creation through thinking, through grasping thoughts and memories and ideas. And so you move toward an empty mind, where consciousness is empty and there's non-attachment. You can actually recognize through mindfulness non-attachment is like this. So you have to know what attachment is before you can really appreciate non-attachment. So I used to deliberately practice becoming obsessed with attachments and then letting them go. So I began to discern that. Where before I was just trying to get rid of desire, it doesn't work. You don't get rid of it. And to think that I can conquer desire as a person, that Ajahn Sumedho is going to conquer his desires, get rid of them, is another ego delusion. You'll never conquer it through the personality, but through understanding it. So this understand sati, sampajanya, panya, these are the words in the Pali. They're quite, we translate them into English and then we think we understand them, but it's really sati sampajanya is not, when we're so caught up in views, opinions, ideas, and that then we don't have sati sampajanya. We might know what the Pali Dictionary said, what great teachers have said, but you don't. It's a recognition of it through the Patipatti, through the practice. But it's quite ordinary. It's not like a high state of samadhi or a kind of outer space kind of experience. It's the opposite of refined conscious experience. It's empty. It's consciousness that's empty, because consciousness, this realm is a conscious realm. And then when you're born, you're conditioned to identify with the body, with the feelings and your parents and culture and so forth. So you're conditioned after you're born. But before that, when a baby first born is conscious and has a human form, and then it's conditioned into becoming a little boy, a little girl, or a Thai, or an American, or whatever. These things, whether you're from wealthy family, poor family, or whatever, these identities come through the conditioning process. Then with mindfulness, you begin to see through those ways that we create ourselves and operate from particular self-views, even with Buddhism, until there's this Putto, this Buddha, this knowing, direct knowing, and then it's simple. What does the Buddha know? He knows all conditions are impermanent, and all Dhamma is not self. Sape Sanghranicca, Sape Tamanata. The Buddha observes, difference between attachment and non-attachment. He discerns the difference. Or suffering and non-suffering, or self and non-self, desire and non-desire. That's the discerning of like an intuitive, I call it intuitive awareness, where you're observing it in a direct way, not through views or definitions you acquire from books or teachers. So then, it's the discerning ability, that's panya, wisdom. In this Buddhist sense of wisdom, what do you mean by panya? It's like, this is discerning, just know the difference between self and non-self. Then you can observe, when I become a person, I become a self, I'm back in the realm of dukkha immediately. I'm self-conscious, all the old habits of my conceits and vanity and that operate almost automatically. And then you're non-self, you just say anatta like this. That's peaceful. To not be anybody, or not attached, to not be attached to conditions. But it's not a rejection of anything, it's a discerning awareness within the limitation that we find ourselves in at every moment. So I've been reading these books, these kind of little books that they publish now of Luang Pu Dun's, Luang Pu Phart Wai, and Luang Pu Dun, we were stopped when we were coming from Ratanawan to here, and yesterday we stopped in Surin, because I wanted to see, because Luang Pu Dun was a disciple of Ajahn Man, but he lived in the town, right in the middle of Surin, and in a Pariyatti monastery, and he lived most of his life there. But his teaching, very similar to Ajahn Chah, very succinct, very brilliant kind of ways of reflecting. They're very good for reflection. So because it's not about analysis, I think it's just very abrupt. And Thai language, of course, lends itself very well to that style, because it, it is a language that has very much evolved through its relationship to Theravada Buddhism. But these are really, here in this country, you have really excellent, teachers, people monks that have had these insights. They're not just coming from Buddhist philosophy anymore, but through actual direct experience, insight, knowing directly themselves. So this is like Luang Por Chah with Tanaja, Ajahn Mahamon, all these monks. You see, all the monks I trained with, they're all old now, kind of not very healthy looking. Ajahn Vitun, he came today. He just had an operation, and he was one of my friends in the early years. And Wat Bapong and Tam Sang Pet. And but you do recognize how, if you stay with it, like it does, once you have these insights, what are you going to, you're in a form that really holds you, gives you the sense of living a life in modern society which is blameless. And I can't think of any other way to live that would be as skillful as this one. It's because it's not my creation. It's not my idea of what the Buddha taught. It's a very traditional, very conservative form of Buddhism, but actually for living your life, like living in England for 34 years, it could still live as a Buddhist monk without any great difficulties in a non-Buddhist country, in a European country. So it's not like you're just going against everything and becoming a real kind of pain in the neck and an oddball to the society. Actually, a relationship to English society was one of respect and the sense of giving opportunities and of blessings rather than converting and forming other cults and divisive religious attitudes towards the society. Because there's enough of that in the UK. In Europe these days, a hodgepodge of strong views about religion, for and against. So, but with this way of we live in a harmonious, in a skillful, kindly way with the society that we're in. And it works, it's not like you have to, there's a lot of pressure, I experience, to change it to fit modern ideas of how things should be, because they want you to modernize Buddhism. But because of the training with Luang Por Chah and that kind of value that he gave, and I began to see that the thing was that I couldn't change it without going outside the tradition. I had to leave it in order to change it to what others wanted or what I wanted, or particularly felt at the time. So, and it's important, that like this insight, I needed to live within a structure that I had no control. I couldn't just manipulate and change it and modernize it and make it Western Buddhism or British Buddhism. I had to, this is like this and keep going within that limitation without being, a stubborn fool, but it's internalized so that you can see your own ditthi, your own conceits about, from your own cultural background and conditioning. So the aim is this empty consciousness. Consciousness non-attached is like this. And then you can actually desist. It's peaceful. There's no self in it. And then when I, become somebody, I have to start thinking, I'm Ajahn Sumedho. And on a level of the conventional reality, fair enough, so go to what we wait tamacha tomorrow, and they say, Tanjong Kun, Rat Sumedho Jan, and all this is the conventional reality. It's not like there's nothing wrong with that, but it's when we bind ourselves to conventional reality that we suffer. So conventional reality, you've got to live with your body as it ages and gets those problems of age and death. You all have to experience loss and despair and fear, and all these are just emotions that one has in one's lifetime as a human being on this planet. But our relationship to it is of understanding rather than grasping and trying to, run away or control or make it into something out of ignorance and willfulness. So tomorrow, when we go to the cremation ceremony, I encourage you to observe how it affects you. I'm not asking you to feel anything, but use the situation. You're in a seat, well, maybe you won't understand what's going on half the time, crowds of people, ceremonies and so forth, and be thousands of people there, and if you don't really understand what's happening or going on, or that, but that's okay. You're just observing. It's like this, so that you can have your own views and opinions about, was this necessary? Or we don't like this ceremony. It's like not liking something like this, or we just feel confused or impatient or with it. Maybe we're fully with it. Maybe we really appreciate it. And it's like this: be appreciative of the respect and ceremonial aspects of Thai Buddhism is like this. So then you're learning to center yourself in Bhutto, in the knowing of the way it is, rather than your own views about how you'd like things to be or not to be. Also.
อันตมยังวัฏคาถายุสาธุพรังธนามัสสีสา